I wasn't looking for anything. I really need to start there, because that's the part that always sticks in my throat when I replay it. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't digging. I was just doing what I do most mornings. Waking up too early, trying not to spill coffee on myself while scrolling through Instagram and half listening to the news. Lauren was already out the door, long gone before sunrise for some big meeting across town. That used to bother me a little, how early she'd started leaving for work. But these days I just tried not to make it a thing. We'd been a little off lately, sure. But every couple goes through dry spells, right? Life gets busy. You settle into routines. You stop noticing the things you used to marvel at. That's just marriage. Or at least that's what I told myself. Anyway, I was sitting at the edge of the bed, scrolling through stories. A few of my coworkers had posted stuff from the company party over the weekend. I hadn't gone. Told Lauren I wasn't feeling it. She didn't push. Said it was mostly her department's crowd. And besides, Jake had a slideshow he needed her to help with. I remember the way she said it, casual, like the name should mean something to me. Didn't. I tapped through a few photos. Same stuff as usual. People pretending to be more drunk than they were. Awkward smiles. Someone doing a sh*t in the background. Then I stopped. Literally froze mid-scroll. It was a photo I didn't recognize, posted by someone I barely knew from HR. It was nothing special at first glance. Just a dim bar sh*t, kind of grainy. But in the center of it, caught like a spotlight on a stage, was Lauren. She didn't see the camera. She wasn't posing, which is maybe what made it worse. She was standing close, too close, to a guy I didn't recognize. Tall, dark-haired, square jaw, blue dress shirt rolled at the sleeves. Her hand was on his chest. Not in a friendly way. Not in a haha you're so funny way. It was flat. Int * mate. Her palm just resting there like it belonged. She was smiling up at him. Not grinning. Smiling. Like she was comfortable. Like they were mid-conversation and she already knew the ending. And the guy, Jake, I'd find out later. He was leaning toward her just enough that their bodies curved inward like a magnet was pulling them together. I **ted it immediately. My thumb hovered over the zoom like it was automatic. I don't know why I sent it to myself. I guess part of me didn't believe what I was seeing and needed to double-check in better light. But I did believe it. The second I saw her hand, I knew. You learn someone's body language when you've been married long enough. I could tell what mood Lauren was in from across the room, by how she folded her arms or how her jaw tensed when she was trying not to cry. And this posture, this look in her eyes, this wasn't random. This was part of something. A continuation. All morning I sat with it. I didn't go to work. I just walked around the house doing chores I didn't need to do, waiting for her to text me or call or say something that would help me believe I was imagining things. I didn't hear a word from her until around 5:30, when she messaged to say she was picking up takeout. I didn't reply. I just stared at the message, wondering how long I'd been an idiot. She came home like nothing was wrong, set the food down on the kitchen counter, gave me a quick kiss on the cheek, then asked if I wanted spring rolls or dumplings. I said dumplings. We ate in near silence. She talked about the supply chain mix-up at work, how accounting screwed up someone's invoice. I nodded along, barely tasting anything. My chest felt like it was wrapped in sandpaper. After dinner, I pulled out my phone and opened the photo. "Do you want to tell me what this is?" I asked. I watched her reaction closely, more closely than I've ever watched anything in my life. Her eyes flicked to the screen. Her mouth didn't even twitch. "That?" she said with a half laugh. "Are you serious?" I didn't say anything, just held the phone there. "Oh my God, Brian," she sighed, like I was the one making this weird. It was slippery. I was in heels. Okay? I leaned on Jake for like 2 seconds. Someone took a picture at the exact wrong time. She reached for her glass of wine and sipped it like the whole thing bored her. "Jake?" I asked. She looked up. "Yeah, Jake. From my team. I've mentioned him." "You never mentioned him touching you like that." She rolled her eyes. "He wasn't touching me. I was leaning on him. The photo just looks weird. God, are we really doing this? You're saying this is all just a bad angle?" "Yes, That's exactly what I'm saying. Jesus, Brian. You didn't even go to the party. Maybe next time show up instead of playing detective on Instagram. It was like being punched with a velvet glove. The kind of insult you almost feel bad for getting mad at. She went on, Jake's married, by the way, in case that matters. I stared at her. And that makes it better? No, it makes it irrelevant. She pushed her chair back and started clearing the plates, clearly done with the conversation. I sat there staring at the spot where her hand had been in that photo, trying to unsee it. The thing is, I could have let it go. I could have forced myself to believe her, chalked it up to a bad camera angle and a slick floor and an overactive imagination. But it wasn't the photo that really got me. It was the way she lied. She didn't flinch. She didn't stutter. She didn't even look confused. She looked prepared, like she'd already thought about what to say, just in case. And that's when I knew. This wasn't some awkward snapsh asterisk T. This wasn't nothing. This was a door I hadn't opened yet. But now I was walking straight through it. They say hindsight is 20/20, but that's not true. Hindsight is a cruel mirror. It doesn't just show you what you missed. It makes you feel stupid for missing it. It doesn't just replay the red flags. It mocks you for folding them into origami and calling them butterflies. That night after I showed Lauren the photo, after she laughed it off and treated me like some jealous sitcom husband, I lay awake in bed while she snored softly next to me, perfectly at peace. I stared at the ceiling fan spinning above us, listening to the soft clicks as it rotated. And my mind, like that fan, went in circles. That's when it started, the mental cataloging. All the little things I'd brushed off over the past few months. Things that had felt off but not quite alarming enough to confront. Not until now. Now, they all came back, and they fit together like puzzle pieces I never realized were part of the same box. The first thing I remembered was her schedule. A couple of months back, she started talking about a new project she was working on. Some collaboration between departments, requiring longer hours and cross-functional meetings. I remember her using that term like she just discovered it, repeating it over and over. But 2 weeks later, she slipped up. I asked her how that project was going, and she blinked, confused for a second, then said, "Oh, that one ended. I'm on the budget revamp now." The switch didn't seem like a big deal at the time. People pivot all the time at work. But now I was replaying the exact words, the pauses, the way she avoided eye contact. She hadn't just forgotten. She'd been covering. Then there were the return times. She used to get home by 6:30, sometimes earlier. But lately, it was all over the place. Some nights it was 7:15, others 8:40. Once, she didn't walk through the door until nearly 11. I had texted her 3 times that night, and each reply had gotten shorter. Busy. Still in a meeting. Will explain later. But she never explained. She just changed into sweats and fell asleep on the couch while I sat beside her pretending to watch TV. Pretending I wasn't dying inside. There was the perfume, too. Lauren had worn the same scent since we met. This soft vanilla cedar thing that lingered in the house like a warm memory. But then it changed. Not all at once, but gradually. It got sharper, heavier, muskier. I noticed it first when I hugged her one morning and caught a whiff of something unfamiliar on her neck. "You switch perfumes?" I asked. She shrugged. "Just trying something new." But it wasn't just perfume. A couple of times, when she got close enough or when she tossed a jacket over a chair, I caught something else. Cologne. Not mine. I don't wear cologne. Never have. The smell was faint, but it clung to the fabric, like someone had been near her for too long. Like it had transferred from skin to clothes the way warmth lingers in bedsheets. The next day, she did all the laundry herself. She never does that. She even took the hamper from our room before I could add anything. When I joked about her turning into Martha Stewart, she laughed too loudly. That laugh, too, it started changing. Like everything she said had an invisible asterisk next to it. Sometimes she'd be extra sweet for no reason, hugging me from behind while I made coffee or calling me pet names we hadn't used in years. Other times, she'd get snappy and cold out of nowhere, like I'd said something offensive just by breathing near her. I started noticing more tech habits, too. Lauren used to leave her laptop open on the kitchen counter. She worked from home a lot, and her browser tabs were always a mess. Recipes, spreadsheets, a half-written email draft. But lately, it was always shut. Always. And when I walked into the room while she was on it, she'd slam the lid like a teenager getting caught watching something she shouldn't. Her phone was another story. It used to live face up on the kitchen table, chiming every few minutes with the group chat she shared with her sister and 2 college friends. But for the past few weeks, it was always face down. And silent. Never vibrated. Never lit up. She claimed she'd put it on Do Not Disturb to stay more present. Said too many notifications were stressing her out. I wanted to believe that. God, I wanted to believe it. But when she changed her lock screen, swapped out the picture of us from our anniversary trip to one of those generic default mountain scenes, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Update glitch, she said when I asked. I'll change it back. She didn't. I noticed she stopped leaving her gym clothes in the laundry, too. That might sound dumb, but she used to come back from spin class and dump her bag right by the washer. These days, the bag never left her trunk. She said she was going straight to the office after class. Said it wasn't a big deal. Except it was. Because the classes she talked about, bar and burn, power core at 7:30. I Googled them. The times didn't match. Some didn't even exist. One night, she came home in yoga pants, flushed and breathless like she'd just run a marathon. But when I hugged her, she didn't smell like sweat. She smelled like wine. Like red wine and mint gum. And something told me she hadn't just finished doing lunges. I began watching her closely. I didn't want to. I hated it. I hated what it turned me into. This silent, lurking presence in my own house, constantly reading between the lines, analyzing every sentence for contradictions. I'd ask her what time she got out of her last meeting, and she'd say 6:15. Then, a day later, she'd mention getting dinner at 6 o'clock. Which was it? The lies weren't even consistent. I started testing her. Small things. Asking about coworkers she'd mentioned in passing. She'd say one was on vacation, then the next week say she had coffee with him. She couldn't keep her own script straight. The scariest part? I don't think she even realized she was lying. I think she had told herself so many stories. She'd stopped keeping track of which ones were true. And yet, she never acted guilty. Not really. Not in the way people act in movies where they cry in the shower or avoid eye contact. She looked me dead in the face, every single day, and kissed me goodbye like nothing had changed. But it had. Something fundamental between us had cracked. I could feel it in the air, in the silence between conversations, in the way she touched me only when she thought she should, not when she wanted to. She stopped asking me questions about my day. Stopped noticing when I was quiet. Stopped offering to pick up my dry cleaning, even though she passed the place every day. It wasn't that she was different. It was that she was trying to be the same. That was the giveaway. When someone changes, they either evolve or fracture. But when they're trying to fake who they were, when they're rehearsing normal instead of living it, you feel it in your gut. And my gut was screaming. I knew what all of this pointed to. I just didn't want to say it yet. Didn't want to admit I was sleeping next to someone who was no longer entirely mine. That I'd become a placeholder in my own marriage. A piece of background furniture. I had no proof. Not yet. But the woman I lived with, the woman I married, wasn't just pulling away. She was disappearing. And someone else was taking her place. The day it all snapped into place was a Thursday. I remember because she made lasagna that night, which she only ever did when she felt guilty. She wasn't much of a cook. Said she never had the patience. But every now and then, she'd pull out a recipe from her mom's old notebook like it was an olive branch. I stared at the pan as she slid it into the oven, smiling like nothing was off. Maybe in her mind this was damage control. She'd sensed I was getting too quiet, too distant, and this was her attempt at pulling me back into the fog. "Everything okay?" she asked as she wiped her hands on a towel. "You've been kind of in your head lately." I lied. I told her I was fine. Told her work was just draining. She nodded too quickly, too relieved, like she wanted the topic buried. Later that evening, around 7:40, she told me she had to head back out. Just a quick meeting. she said, already slipping her arms into that gray coat she never used to wear. One of our partners is in town. I need to drop off some signed paperwork. Late meeting, I said casually. She smiled. Yeah, but it's just a couple hours. I'll probably be back before you fall asleep. I asked if she wanted me to wait up. She waved it off like it was nothing. And with that, she was gone. That should have been the end of it. In the old days, I would have flipped on a movie, maybe gone to bed early. But something in me had shifted. I couldn't sit there and let the lies stack up anymore. Instead, I walked over to the living room and grabbed the iPad. We shared it. It was technically hers, but she left it unlocked all the time. We used it mostly for watching Netflix, checking recipes, or FaceTiming with her sister. And more importantly, she was logged into her Google account. I hadn't touched it in weeks. But tonight, I sat down with it like a man about to detonate his own life. I opened the Maps app. Her Gmail was still connected. For a second, nothing loaded. Then, with a quiet ding, a red location pin dropped onto the screen. An apartment complex. Pine Street, west side of the city. We'd never been there together. I couldn't think of a single reason she would be there. It wasn't close to her office. It wasn't near her gym. It wasn't by any restaurant we'd ever been to. It was a neighborhood that didn't exist in our life. Without hesitation, I grabbed my keys. The drive took about 20 minutes. Long enough for my thoughts to spiral. I kept trying to rationalize it. Maybe it was an Airbnb she was using for work? Maybe she was meeting a client? But every excuse I reached for fell apart before I finished the thought. She wasn't dressed for business. And this wasn't a hotel. It was a residential complex. Gated, modest, two-story buildings with small balconies and street-facing windows. I parked across the road in a darkened lot beside a stairwell. It gave me a clean view of the building's second floor. Apartment 2B. The lights were on. And that's when I saw her. Through a sheer curtain, lit by warm yellow lamps, stood Lauren. My wife. She was barefoot, holding a wine glass, laughing. She turned, and a second figure stepped into view. Him. Jake. The same man from the photo. The one she'd sworn was just a coworker. Just a friend. He was close, too close. He walked up behind her, placed a hand on her lower back, and leaned down. She tilted her head, looked up at him with that same slow smile. Then he kissed her. Not a quick peck. Not a forehead kiss. A real kiss. Long, deliberate. Like no one was watching. And I watched it all. Every second felt like I was being skinned from the inside out. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just stood there, staring through the window, watching my marriage rot in real time. He pulled back, whispered something in her ear. She laughed again, carefree, soft. I'd heard that laugh before. She used to save it for me. They sat down on the couch, pizza box on the coffee table. Her legs curled under her, his hand resting on her knee. It wasn't just a hookup. This wasn't some spontaneous fling. There were candles on the table, a blanket draped over the back of the couch, photos on the shelf, books, half-open mail. This was a place she'd been before, more than once. I thought about taking a picture. Part of me wanted evidence, something I could shove in her face later. But the other part of me, the part that still hadn't fully accepted it, couldn't move. I stood there for nearly 20 minutes. Long enough to see her lay her head on his shoulder. Long enough to see him brush hair from her face. Long enough to know this wasn't new. This was established. This was practiced. This was their place. My chest was tight, but not from panic. It was something else, something quieter. My heartbeat slowed. My thoughts became weirdly calm. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. Instead, something inside me just shut off. I wasn't even hurt in that moment. I was detached, like I'd floated out of my own body and was watching a stranger's life burn from a distance. And all I kept thinking was, so this is it. This is the moment. There was no undoing it. No gaslighting. No explanation she could offer later that would make this photo a misunderstanding. She wasn't tripping on a slippery floor here. She was at home. Her other home. Eventually, I turned and walked back to my car. The air was cold, and I welcomed the sting in my lungs. It was real, unlike everything else. I didn't go home right away. I drove for a while. Nowhere in particular. Just streets and turns and more streets. I ended up in the parking lot of a grocery store, sitting under a broken light, engine off, silence thick. I stared at the steering wheel, fingers wrapped tight around it. My whole life, I thought I was the kind of person who would explode in a moment like that. That I'd lose it. That I'd confront her. That I'd throw punches or scream or sob or anything dramatic. But I didn't. What I felt was worse. I felt empty. Completely, utterly hollow. And then, beneath that emptiness, something new formed. Something focused. Clean. Cold. Resolve. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to prepare. I pulled out my phone not to call her, but to open a notepad. And I started writing things down. Dates, inconsistencies, things she'd said that didn't add up. I listed names, times, bank transactions I vaguely remembered. If she wanted to live a double life, fine. But I was done playing the oblivious husband. When I finally walked back into our house. My house. The lights were off. Lauren hadn't returned yet. I went upstairs, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the closet. Her side was full. Shoes, scarves, dresses she hadn't worn in months. And all I could think about was how she'd probably worn something from that closet. Our closet, when she went to be with him. When she was with Jake. I didn't sleep that night. Not even a little. I just lay there, eyes open, one foot on the floor like I was ready to stand at any second. Because now I knew the truth. And knowing it changed everything. The next morning, she came home as if nothing had happened. I heard the front door open just after 6. Keys jingling, the click of her heels on the tile, the hum she always made when she thought I was still asleep. For a split second, I wondered if she could feel my eyes on her through the dark. If guilt carried weight. She crept into the bedroom, tiptoeing like a thief. I stayed perfectly still, my back to her. The mattress dipped slightly when she sat down to remove her shoes. Then I heard the faint rustle of clothes, the zipper of her purse, the whisper of fabric as she changed into pajamas. When she finally slid under the covers, she let out a sigh. Not the tired kind, but the satisfied one. I knew that sound. I used to be the reason for it. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just listened to her breathing until it evened out. And that was the moment I decided. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. Not while she was holding all the cards, spinning all the lies. She thought she was in control, that I was still stumbling around blind, questioning my own instincts. But that illusion ended last night on Pine Street. So I made myself a promise. No arguments, no accusations, no scenes. I would dismantle this quietly, piece by piece, until there was nothing left for her to hide behind. That morning, when she finally woke up around 9, I was sitting at the kitchen table drinking coffee and scrolling through my laptop. She blinked at me in surprise. "Morning," she said, her voice coated in fake normalcy. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," I replied, not looking up. She hesitated, like she wanted to ask more, but instead poured herself coffee and joined me. For a minute, it felt like an ordinary morning. The clink of mugs, the hum of the fridge, sunlight creeping across the floor. But the air between us had shifted. She didn't know it, but we were no longer living the same story. While she chatted about a supplier delay and her boss's vacation plans, I was already strategizing. Step 1. Information. Over the next few days, I became someone else, quiet, efficient, invisible. While she was out working late, I combed through our finances. I had access to everything, joint accounts, savings, credit statements. Lauren had always trusted me with the numbers. She once joked that I was the CFO of our marriage. That irony wasn't lost on me now. The deeper I dug, the more fractures appeared. Small transfers I'd never noticed before. A few hundred here, 500 there. Labels like consulting expense and marketing fee. They weren't huge individually, but they added up. Nearly $9,000 gone in the last 6 weeks. I opened each transaction one by one, tracing them to an external account. digital wallets, contractor payments. Then one name popped up, Jake Carson. Took me a few seconds to process it. Then I laughed, quietly, bitterly. She wasn't just cheating with him emotionally or physically. She was paying him. The description said, project consulting. Sure, if consulting meant funneling our money into her secret affair, then the label fit perfectly. Step 2, documentation. I started saving everything, *TS of transactions, copies of her emails, calendar entries, even photos of her business meetings from Pine Street. I bought a flash drive and labeled it Tax Docs 2022. She'd never look twice. Every night, when she thought I was asleep, I uploaded another piece of her double life. Step 3, allies. I reached out to a lawyer I knew, an old client from my firm. We'd done business together years ago, and I trusted him to be discreet. We met at a small cafe across town. I told him I needed legal advice for a delicate marital matter. I didn't give names, not yet. He asked a few questions, then nodded slowly. You're doing the right thing documenting everything, he said. The worst mistake people make is confronting too early. Once they know, they'll destroy the evidence. That stuck with me, so I kept playing my part. At home, I was the same old Brian. I asked about her day. I cooked dinner. I laughed when she told dumb stories about her coworkers. Every gesture, every word was part of the act. The more normal I seemed, the sloppier she got. She started leaving her laptop unlocked again. Maybe out of guilt, maybe arrogance. I found files tied to that grant project she mentioned months ago. Internal memos, emails, and one particularly interesting PDF. Grant Application 42B, Partnership Proposal. My name was on it. Not just mentioned, signed. Except I never signed it. At the bottom, next to Brian Whitaker, construction consultant, was my forged signature. Perfectly replicated right down to the slant of the letters. I scrolled through the document, my pulse steady. In the proposal, she described her husband's extensive background in sustainable architecture and materials engineering. She'd pulled entire lines from my LinkedIn profile, like cutting pieces of my life to paste into hers. Worse, the application listed our joint bank account as the receiving account for the initial grant, meaning she'd used our finances, my name, and my credentials to fund her secret venture. And Jake? He was listed as operations manager. That's when everything clicked. The missing money, the late nights, the mysterious projects. She wasn't just cheating with him. They were partners in more ways than one. I sat back in my chair and felt the strangest calm wash over me. For weeks, I'd been walking through fog, tripping over my own doubts. Now the ground was solid beneath me. This wasn't just infidelity anymore. This was fraud. And I was done being a bystander. Step 4. Preparation. I made copies of everything: financial statements, emails, the grant file. I stored one flash drive in my work safe and another at my lawyer's office. I even printed a few pages and sealed them in an envelope labeled for compliance review. I didn't plan to send it yet, but the power of knowing I could, that was enough. For the first time in months, I felt control. Lauren still thought she was dancing on glass, but she didn't realize I'd already swept up the shards. Every smile she gave me now, every kiss goodnight, felt like a performance in a play she didn't know I'd already read the ending to. Sometimes, I'd lie awake next to her and wonder what she'd do if she knew I'd seen her with him. If she knew that every document she touched, every transfer she made, every careless word she spoke, was now cataloged under evidence. But I didn't want a confrontation anymore. I wanted precision, justice, not revenge. And the best kind of strike is the one they never see coming. So I smiled when she smiled. I played along when she told me she'd be home late. I even kissed her on the cheek as she left, knowing exactly where she was headed. Each day, my silence grew heavier. A quiet, calculated *P***N. Because when I finally decided to use it, it wouldn't be loud. It would be final. At some point, the pain stopped being sharp. I'm not sure when it happened exactly. Maybe it was the night I found the grant application with my forged signature. Or maybe it was when I realized she'd used our shared account to bankroll her affair. Either way, the bleeding had stopped. What was left was something colder, thicker. Less grief, more resolve. She didn't just cheat on me. She stole from me. She used me. And she was still doing it every single day. So I kept digging. I wasn't just looking for closure anymore. I wanted the full blueprint of her second life. Every lie, every corner, every fake brick she laid to build a version of herself that needed me only as a name, a credential, a cover. That next week, while Lauren worked late, I opened up her work cloud from the iPad. She must have assumed I'd forgotten it had auto-login enabled, or maybe she just didn't care. Either way, she'd gotten sloppy. And inside, neatly organized in folders, was everything I needed. The first folder I opened was labeled Partnership Materials. It started innocently enough: presentations, pitch decks, vendor lists. Then deeper: spreadsheets detailing projections for a startup called LoomGrid, a sustainable housing initiative she and a small internal team were building under the radar. I remembered her saying she was mentoring a junior team for a side pilot project. She made it sound like an extracurricular, something cute, something optional. But this was full-on business. They'd filed a preliminary incorporation document, registered a domain, outlined equity shares. Lauren had 60%. Jake had 40%. And me? Apparently, I was a silent advisor with senior credentials in eco-architecture, with a quote attributed to me in the proposal. Except I never gave that quote. It read, "Sustainable housing isn't just the future. It's the now. And it should be accessible without compromise. That's why I believe in LoomGrid." I sat there staring at my own name under that sentence, heart pounding in this slow, dull rhythm. It wasn't just the lie. It was how easily she'd put words in my mouth. How natural it seemed for her to invent a version of me that aligned perfectly with whatever story she was selling. But that wasn't even the worst part. Buried inside a folder called LoomGrid, Round 1 Submissions, was a scanned PDF of a letter. Formal one, addressed to a foundation I'd never heard of. It opened with, "As the founder of LoomGrid, and alongside my husband Brian Whitaker, whose expertise in sustainable construction and regulatory compliance has been instrumental to our roadmap." I stopped reading. My vision blurred for a second. There was an attached contract, a funding agreement, and it listed our joint bank account as the receiving destination for an initial grant of $25,000. I pulled open our bank records again and searched for any large deposits. Nothing. Then I realized, she must have redirected it later, transferred it out, buried the trail, rerouted through Jake's wallet or some shell contractor account. The signature at the bottom of the grant letter was mine. Again, the date? It was the same weekend she said she was flying to Denver for a conference. I remember that trip. She said it was too short for me to tag along, too packed with meetings. She kissed me goodbye at the airport, told me she'd bring back snacks from the hotel minibar. She came back with a souvenir mug and a folder of handouts. The mug was still in our kitchen cabinet. Now it felt radioactive. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in the office going through every folder, every doc, trying to piece together the full timeline. The deeper I went, the more I saw how calculated it all was. This wasn't a spontaneous affair. It wasn't some emotional spiral or midlife mistake. It was architecture. Lauren had built this secret life like a house, with permits, insulation, finishing touches. The only thing she didn't plan for was me walking through the wrong door at the right time. And now that I had the floor plan, I couldn't unsee it. At breakfast the next morning, she poured me coffee and told me her calendar was insane that week. She said it with this fake exasperation, like she was just trying to keep up with corporate chaos. I watched her stir in 2 sugars, just the way I like it. She handed me the mug and smiled. I looked her right in the eye and smiled back. She had no idea. No idea that I knew about the forged contracts, the fake partnership, the misappropriated funds, the documents with my name on them being sent to real people in real offices under the assumption that I was part of this scam. Because that's what it was. A scam. She wasn't just cheating. She was laundering legitimacy through me. using my name and credentials to prop up her startup so it could gain early momentum before investors asked hard questions. The next day, I went back to my lawyer. This time, I brought the flash drive. I slid it across the table and watched his face as he clicked through the files. Every so often, he'd pause, scroll back, tilt his head. After 20 minutes, he looked up. "This isn't just grounds for divorce," he said quietly. "This could be criminal exposure if it goes public." I asked what my options were. He laid them out cleanly. I could press charges. I could file civil claims. I could expose the startup, submit the documentation to the funding body, and burn the whole thing down from the inside. But first, he said, I had to decide something bigger. "Do you want revenge?" he asked. "Or do you want your life back?" Took me a minute to answer, because the truth was part of me wanted both. But deep down, I knew something had shifted. I didn't need her to hurt. I didn't need to humiliate her. I needed to free myself. This wasn't about proving I was the better spouse. It was about reclaiming the version of me that she'd stolen and repurposed without my consent. The man who worked late hours, built his career on honesty, kept his marriage vows, stayed loyal while she whispered in another man's ear and handed him my reputation like it was a party favor. I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to break things or throw accusations across the kitchen. That's what she expected. Drama, emotional chaos. Scenes she could twist into stories about how Brian always had a temper, or things just got messy. But I wasn't giving her that script. I was going to hand her the truth. Silently, legally, irrevocably. I spent the next week preparing in secret. I made copies of the contracts and shared them with my lawyer's private investigator. We contacted the foundation listed on the grant. Quietly, anonymously, the investigator confirmed the funds were real. The grant had been approved, dispersed, and redirected. The moment I read that email, everything inside me crystallized. It was official. She had used my identity to secure real money, and that made this real fraud. All I had to do now was decide when to pull the trigger. I watched her come and go like clockwork, each day adding another fake brick to her empire. She had no idea that behind the scenes, her story was starting to collapse. And that's the thing about double lives. Eventually, one of them demands a cost the other can't afford. I arrived late to the company anniversary party. Calm, collected. She smiled like nothing was wrong. During the toast, a coworker joked behind my back, not realizing I heard. 2 days later, he was fired. I'd anonymously submitted every document. Fraud, forged contracts, money trails. Lauren's access was revoked. HR launched an investigation. The party was over. She didn't know yet, but the floor under her was already gone. She came home to pack, eyes dull, no excuses left. "I lost you," she whispered. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I said, "You spent me like a card you stopped reloading." She didn't argue, just nodded. No drama, no begging. She walked out the door with a silence that felt final. And when I closed it behind her, I knew that was the last time I'd ever open it for her. And somehow I felt okay.